Welcome to DIYeasycrafts and Berg.knifemaking.com. Today we're going to take a look at making some Christmas micarta. Now micarta is defined as a paper or material that's saturated in resin and pressed. And you press it to get out as much of the resin, and what you're left behind with is a very durable, almost fiberglass-like material. Now this particular project hinged around a Christmas-themed etched chef's knife. My first idea was to use Christmas wrapping paper to make micarta, and I thought this would have really looked kind of cool. It wasn't the right season, so I'm using leftover wrapping material or wrapping paper from last season, and it's probably not my first choice of wrapping paper. This one has a glossy surface to it, so I wasn't 100% sure whether I was going to be able to get full saturation with the fiberglass resin. So basically, the first part of this video, I'm going to show you a couple of failed attempts at making Christmas micarta. This is the first failed attempt. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one, just show you the basics. I made this like I make all my micarta. I have a micarta press, which is just 4x4s, screwed to a piece of pine. You clamp it together, you let it dry. It's wrapped in a parchment paper so the fiberglass resin doesn't stick to that. And when I first took it out of the press, it really looked kind of good. It's nice and hard. Not quite thick enough, but all the color's there, and it certainly would have looked, really over the top as knife handles. Unfortunately, even though when I ground the corner, all of the layers looked good, when I really took a good look at it and poked at the edges with a knife, you could see that the paper was going to separate right along each one of those glossy surfaces. So it was worth the effort. You had to try it out, but this is what happened. You could easily separate each layer, and you certainly don't want that to happen with any of your knife handles. The next attempt, I went down to the local arts and crafts supply store, and I bought white and red felt. Now I've used felt before in making micarta, different colors, blue and black, etc. It always comes out really nice. When I saturated the white, it went translucent. So even when I was doing this, I was a little bit concerned about what it was going to come out like. But the fiberglass was already mixed up. I went ahead with it and pressed it and let it dry and took it out. And unfortunately, the red came out really nice, but the white wasn't white anymore. It was just translucent. So not what I was looking for. What I was really trying to go for here, since I couldn't use the wrapping paper, is to make kind of like a candy cane look, striped red and white. So now the third take, I went and got some white cardstock. I figured the red looked really good. The red felt looked really good. I would just use some white. So I'm going to layer 2 or 3 pieces of white for each one piece of red felt, because the paper itself is so much thinner than the felt. I just wanted to kind of even up the thickness a little bit. And because I'm getting a little bit frustrated, I didn't go super thick with this micarta, paper and felt micarta. I really just wanted to see if it was going to work, because even that white cardstock was getting a little transparent on me when I was saturating it. So this came out of the parchment paper, and it actually looked really good. A little hard to see in the video. The surface piece of white paper is a little translucent, but if you look at the edges, I was pretty satisfied with this. But it's not thick enough, and I knew that. I decided to make it a little thicker, but I would change it up a little bit. So now I'm going to make another batch of micarta, and this one I'm just going to do with red and white construction paper. The rationale behind this is I'm going to laminate the two together. So I'm going to have thick stripes excuse me, towards the blade, and then I'll have some thinner striped micarta as you get away from the blade. I'm going to use 2 sheets of white and 2 sheets of red on each level. So now we're working on the actual micarta, for this project. Take a look at my setup. It's very simple. I have a board that goes across a garbage can. I use a piece of cardboard on one side as my workstation, in order to laminate each sheet. I've got my micarta press all set up with the parchment paper, and any garbage I have easily goes in that garbage can. And you'll see once I do the pressing, any of the excess fiberglass that gets pushed out of the micarta press is going to drip right into that garbage can. So it's kind of an easy, no mess way of making micarta. Now you have to do more micarta or more layers than you think you will need, because it gets pressed pretty thin. You're not going to have the thickness from all the fiberglass resin. Most of that resin is actually going to get pushed out or pressed down. I also wear 2 pair of gloves. It allows me to take 1 pair off, get rid of the wet fiberglass. Now I have, hands that I'm not going to contaminate everything I touch with. I'm going to wrap up that micarta in the parchment paper. Put the press together. It's a very simple press. Just 2 4x4s as the base and 1 as the top. And then I'm going to turn that so that the edges will allow any drippings to go right into that garbage can. They'll just drip right outside the thickness of my board, or the width of my board, right into the garbage can. I use 4 clamps, and you don't want to clamp one side real tight. You want to kind of go evenly with this. And you want to watch the distance, or the space in between that top clamp, or the top board, and the bottom. You really want to end up with it being kind of even from left to right and from side to side. Otherwise, the finished product is going to be, thin on one end and thicker on the other. You see all the excess fiberglass resin just dripping right out into the garbage can. And depending on the temperature, 2-3 hours, you can usually unclamp it. I'm just using regular Bondo fiberglass resin. It's fiberglass resin I get down at the local Home Depot. It's nothing special. And just like the felt and paper micarta, this one came out real nice. Nice and hard. Colors are good. So now all I'm going to do is glue these 2 pieces together. I'm going to sand them a little bit first. Then I'll glue these 2 pieces together. You could do it with 2-part epoxy. I just did it with fiberglass resin. Clamped it while it was drying. And then when it was finished drying, I cut it up into usable pieces. I'm not going to show you the whole mounting the handles on the knife blade. I've done that on numerous videos. But I will just go through, some of the basics. Now, micarta cuts a little bit harder than wood. Kind of similar to some of the hybrid cast scales that you can buy. I rough cut it on a bandsaw, and then I'm going to shape it on my 2x72 belt grinder. This is an Origin Blade Maker 2x72, 2 horsepower and variable speed. It's the prime machine in the shop. So this fiberglass micarta shapes very easily. Use a 60 or an 80 grit, and once you start to grind it, you can really start to see those layers. So you can see here the thin layers are the paper, the thicker layers are the felt. That should give a really interesting look once we shape those scales. I've mentioned this on previous videos. I always like to polish the very front edge of the scales because they're really impossible to do once they're mounted onto the knife blade. And after polishing, you can really get kind of an advanced look at what the finished product is going to polish up like. Now I mount my micarta handles or scales to my blades just like I do, almost any other material. I'm going to glue them with a 2-part epoxy. I first prep both the blade and the material with sandpaper and alcohol and let it dry. And then I use a 2-part epoxy. I do it in stages. I do one side of the handle, then I drill the holes. Then I do the other side of the handle and drill the holes. I use something called the Northgard technique. It just allows me to get the handles placed exactly where I want them to, pretty easily. Micarta drills very easily, but I do always use a backer board just to prevent blowout. I mentioned before you can use a bandsaw to trim off any excess material. You could also use a pin saw, it cuts pretty easily. And then I'm going to profile it back on the 2x72. I usually use a 60 grit for this rough work. And then when I go vertical, in order to clean up all of those coarse grind lines, I'll go with an 80 and then a 120. All I'm really saying here is that profiling the knife handles, and working with this material is just like you would work with almost any other knife handle or knife scale material. You definitely want to wear a respirator. This is basically grinding fiberglass. You don't want to be breathing in these airborne contaminants, and you probably want to take a cold shower afterwards to get that fiberglass off of all of your skin. Not a hot shower, because that would open up the pores and you'll just be itchy. I actually use the 2x72 to kind of round over the top edge of the knife handles. And again, now you can really see those different layers and the different thicknesses of the material. So for future reference, if I want something with thicker lines, I'm going to use felt, and thinner lines, I'll use the paper. Final shaping is where you're going to start to see some of those lines emerge. I use a oscillating sander. You can also use the belt grinder. You can use a Dremel grinder. I did a little hand sanding after this and then polishing, and the knife was complete. So this is a Christmas themed, full blade etched, it's electro etched, car battery charger and electrolyte solution. This is AEBL stainless steel knife with Christmas, and I'll call them candy cane micarta scales. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Comments are always welcome. Please check us out on the web at DIYeasycrafts.com. If you like any of my knives, you can check those out at Berg Knifemaking.com. I'd also like to give you an invite to join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. Thank you very much,